right, should we move on to Collision?
Yes.
All right, well, if all the little colliders are out there ready for the review, we're going to talk about the big match and more on Collision last night, July 15th. And just at the top of the segment here, can we say that when was the last time that good a tag team wrestling match was on television anywhere for anybody?
I could not tell you. And if I thought about it, it would probably be a match of either FTR or The Revival. And how many of them were TV versus takeover specials or whatever?
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm talking, because obviously the trilogy with the Briscoes was all on pay-per-view or some method of distribution, not national television. And those were different matches anyway. We've seen in FTR are masters because they're students of tag team wrestling. They're masters of different kinds of matches. And we've seen the Bloody Grudge match, Chaos Chain match with the Briscoes. But this was two wrestling teams. And, it used to be like a wrestling team in the territory days was Tully and Arn, or Jack and Jerry Briscoe, or the Midnight Express. The Moondogs or the Sheep Herders were the brawling teams, the crazy teams. And FTR have managed to be the specialists in both of those widely disparaging styles here over the last year and a half or two. So anyway, let's start out with the program at the top. They do the locker room interviews, just brief enough to get you into it. It's like a wrestling program. Imagine that.
The music behind it that they're using is perfect. It reminds everyone of Saturday Night's Main Event, but even there and here, it's perfect.
And, once we get through Elton, Kevin Kelly was in Japan for New Japan. We got Nigel McGuinness and my friend Ian Riccaboni, who I worked with a couple of times. We did the Ring of Honor pay-per-view and the NWA tournament, blah, blah, the Crockett Cup, blah, blah, blah. I like Ian. And we always talk about how Ian and Caprice have done a fantastic job. And the critique that I will give Ian is he was trying too hard here to do a fantastic job, wasn't he?
I thought he did a really good job. I wouldn't say that.
I thought by the, not just in the match, in the tag match, but by the end of the program, I was afraid he's going to hurt himself. He was really excited.
Yeah, I don't think, again, I don't think Kevin Kelly was as natural 25 years ago as he is now. I think it's hard for a lot of these guys to be natural out there, and I think Ian's really good, and I think the only thing traditionally, and I didn't have it too much of a problem for this show, but traditionally sometimes it feels a little less natural, but I think that'll kind of go away with more and more work. And apparently they just signed him to a multi-year deal, so we'll be seeing a lot more of him.
No, I'm a supporter. I think I think that Ian should have been more last night, like he always. Ian should have been more Ian. And he was a little much. But anyway, nevertheless, I did like the cowboy hat and the pink suit. He managed to, because they were in Calgary for the Stampede, so he got the Stampede and the Hart family colors in all at the same time. But they started the show with Gin and Juice and FTR. 2 out of 3 falls, 60-minute time limit, World Tag Team Championship. Everything was laid out in the introduction. And by 7 minutes into the program, they're ringing the bell. And the people were ready for this. You could tell at the start, they had the FTR chants, obviously, but they didn't rush the start. Because not only they knew they were putting in time, but they're telling a story. They didn't start with the goddamn landing on Omaha Beach when you're telling the story of World War II, right? So they needed to start out, and the heels got on the bicycle, and they felt each other out a little bit. But then I don't know how else to say this, but anybody watching these guys work in this match and then evaluating how smooth they look, how they wrestle, how they are, the ring positioning, the timing. they're a whole different species from most of the other talent on this roster. And it's obvious, it's visually obvious. I don't know why that some people can't see the difference between the fucking guy in the outfit, going up on the top rope for a synchronized dive and what these guys are doing that takes skill. Anyway.
And almost for an hour here. I mean, that's the thing. I've never seen a Young Bucks match that could approach this match.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Well, beyond the different styles, again, it was all of that, and it was an hour. It was an hour, this whole thing.
Because they're telling a story, and it makes sense from one thing to the other, and they build to the end, because you'd rather have the climactic scene of the movie at the end instead of 15 minutes in, and then you got to sit through another hour and 45, right? It has to be in the proper order. And also, they didn't do things in the first 30 minutes to kill each other to the point where when they did something in the later points of the match, it would have some meaning. They didn't survive a shooting after 20 minutes to be beaten by a goddamn blackjack in 55 or whatever. But right here also, Jay White and Juice Robinson both, I didn't think much of, I liked Juice's gimmick, but I didn't think much of Jay White because I can't even remember when he first came in who he fucking wrestled. But it wasn't this and it wasn't these guys.
And I think it was a throwaway thing, like he showed up on Wednesday to be announced for Friday.
Yeah, so whatever the fuck. But these kind of matches with these kind of talents, this is the way they get over, by having good, memorable matches and showings to where the fans begin to realize they're consistent. When we see them, it's going to be good. That's the way a wrestler or a wrestling team gets over. That's what I told Jim Herd that time about Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. I said, you'd rather have Sid than Arn. I said, Sid will draw you $1 million in one night. He said, what's the matter with that? I said, because after they've seen it, they don't want to see it again. But Arn Anderson would draw you money every night for 5 years, just not $1 million all at once. That was the fucking principle. These are guys that you want in your main event mix because they're dependable and they can produce with anybody. And then you filter in the other, the people you can steal a house off of every once in a while. Anyway, so they did some nice smooth work and they went to break after 4 minutes, which I didn't have a problem with because it's 2 out of 3 falls and they're going to go a while. But then when they came back, the way we've been talking about formatting the show worked. They gave this match as much time on the air as they could and then shortened up their segments in a second hour. So when they came back, they did an uninterrupted 12-minute segment. And this is where they really started kicking in. And just some of them, I'm not going to try to blow by blow this thing because it was insane, but Juice can throw punches. Imagine that. And I wrote Cash and Juice, great fucking wrestling because they were wrestling. Remember we said it here earlier in this program, I couldn't tell whether Nick Wayne could work or not after I'd seen his match because they didn't do any wrestling moves. Well, here I've actually remembered what wrestling moves look like. They did so many of them. And again, then they would go into a running spot and it would pay off. And then they're laying the chops in, but they're not standing there doing the ridiculous, okay, hit me, I dare you. They're chopping each other stiff and they're reacting to them.
Yeah.
And they're trying to use them as offensive weapons instead of, and there's none of this ridiculous, I'll get you in the corner and I'll slap my leg with one hand while I'm rubbing my tummy with the other and slap you like I'm a goddamn Girl Scout. It's a fight. They started heat on Dax with a shoulder into the post. And that, all these injuries play into shit later on. Again, suddenly, boom, Dax is fighting back with the stiffs, chops, the big clotheslines. They do a series of really nice false finishes, and suddenly, White hits his finish on Cash, boom, 1, 2, 3, and the challengers are 1 fall up.
And that first fall was one of the best tag team matches I've ever seen.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And we got to see it because there had been 19 minutes since the bell, but 16 minutes of it had been on the air. They took one break in that time.
And, by the way, I didn't even thought about that like that, but you bring it up. Having so much match with so few commercial interruptions kept me through the picture-in-picture.
Yeah, because now you're invested. You've been sitting there watching something that long. It's not like, you put a fucking tape in and in 4 minutes you say, well, I'm not really out of it. But after you spend 20 minutes, yeah, you're kind of going to see what the fuck. Anyway. And of course, when they go to break, the next fall would continue after the, rest period or whatever. So they come back. The second fall is in progress, but they're working on Dax's arm that had been posted before. And Cash and White did some excellent stuff. And the thing is that I said they're students of tag team wrestling. Neither one of these teams is a copy. And especially FTR is not a copy of either Tully and Arn or the Rock and Roll Express or the Midnight Express or the Funks or whoever, but they take all kinds of shit that all those guys used to do. They did the Midnight Express. I'll pick the guy up for an ass bump, but I'll drop him with the leg drop over the opponent. And they did other shit that they've seen different teams do in the past, and nobody does this shit anymore. And their positioning is great. Anyway, then they get some heat on Cash, and Cash can sell. And they got the FTR chants going in the crowd. And Cash is fighting back against both of them, and Jay White's ripping at his face. There's clear heels and baby faces in the style of work here. And it's not that, one team is Bob Backlund in his collegiate outfit, and the other team's the fucking Sheik with a pencil carving somebody up. It's that the heel team, Gin and Juice, as I call them, they'll stick a finger in your eye, or they'll take a fucking shortcut, or they'll cheat behind the referee's back. And FTR will too, but they don't do it first. They do it when provoked. Those little subtle things. And everybody's in the right place mentally and psychologically. They got some This Is Awesome. I'm sorry. First of all, they actually had a hot tag. Cash fought back and got a hot tag to Dax where he had to overcome a couple bumps in the road and, get it at the last second. And then Dax did a big comeback and nice stuff and handled both of him himself and hit a brain buster on Juice for a 2 count. And then they got the This Is Awesome shit going. And, it was back and forth like that. They kept everything moving, but not at 100 miles an hour constantly. There would be ebbs and flows. And then something would pay off. And then the heels would take control again.
And this was the right crowd for this match, too. The crowd was with it. The crowd was making noise even. Like you said, they didn't go too fast. You wouldn't know it because the crowd was active the whole time.
But yeah, because they were seeing something on a regular enough basis that they could really react to, but they weren't just worn out by, my God, this guy's flying this direction and this guy's diving on this guy. And it's just, what the fuck? And then FTR went for their superplex splash combination. But Cash splashed Jay White's knees that he had drawn up, and then Juice came off the other top and splashed Dax. And this is complicated stuff, and they're hitting it not only in the right place, but with the perfect timing. And then Juice wasn't the legal guy, which everybody pointed out. So he had to get Jay to cover Dax, and it only got a 2 count by that point. And that got a giant roar, and the people were standing up at that point. And then they did this spot again, perfect timing. Juice grabs a headlock on Dax, but Dax backs him up to shoot him off and blind tags Cash behind him, shoots Juice off and drops down. Cash comes in and leapfrogs Juice. Juice keeps hitting the ropes. Both of them drop down and then into the shatter machine or big rig or whatever they call it these days. It boom. 1, 2, 3 for the second fall. That was a variation on the classic Tennessee tiptoe spot. And they did it perfectly, and everybody was, the timing was excellent. And that was a 17-minute segment. So now at the end of the second fall.
That was one of the best tag team matches I've ever seen, that second fall.
Yeah, the second fall. And 39 minutes since the bell, they'd had 33 minutes of it on the air. And so you're able to feel like you're experiencing it, what's going on, instead of you can't keep track of it because they break it up every 6 minutes. And again, something we haven't mentioned, this is not even, it's not even like the Midnight Rock and Roll or the Midnight and Fantastics or any of the classic territory tag team matches where we were able to work with these guys in house shows for, 5 to 10 times a week. I would think that these guys have not worked with each other more than a few. The last week and limited amounts at that point, they haven't been in the same place, right?
Well, Juice Robinson used to be in developmental. I just don't remember if him and FTR overlapped in terms of actual matches.
Yeah, it hadn't been Bobo Brazil and the Sheik in terms of nonstop working with each other for 30 years where they know each other. So they had to really not only adapt on the fly, and there were a few bobbles that I saw where guys were adapting on the fly on spots that they were sprinting through, and there's nothing wrong with that because they adapted and you couldn't fucking tell problems. But then they come back again and the third fall is in progress. And now they've got the four-way going where they brought the fight into it. And there was not one goddamn piece of furniture harmed in the making of this motion picture. And they were only on the floor for this part that we're about to talk about. And golly, and nobody bled.
But they broke multiple of the rules that we talked about earlier in the show.
Well, remind me at the end to talk about that. Remind me hold on, I'm going to write down broken rules. Talk about it. Broken rules. Hold on. I'm writing that down. Here's one thing. So they got the four-way and Jay White backdrop Dax on the apron. And let me just say this as a blanket statement on this match. Everything in wrestling is dangerous. If your kid is a high school cheerleader and she's doing a cartwheel on the sidewalk, that's potentially dangerous. She can break her ankle, whatever. Everything in wrestling is dangerous, but there was nothing unprofessional, egregiously unsafe, or done in a manner in which that I wouldn't myself have okayed a particular thing in this match. And in some cases, when guys are good enough, I don't mind telling people when somebody fucks up because it's obvious. But when guys are good enough to be doing little things to make them safer and still create the magic, I don't want to pop their bubble. But the backdrop on the apron was the best one I've seen. They did at one point, goddamn, we may have already passed it, but they did a vertical suplex over the top where I think it was Cash and Juice, and they both went over. And that was one of the best examples of that bump I've ever done. And I don't know how you could do, or I've ever seen. I don't know how you could have done it any more safely and professionally and still have the risk involved in everything. But there was some stuff in this match that, yes, I'll say it now, was banned by the memo, but
without permission.
But that's, well, and obviously these people had permission, but still, you can't. That's why there was never anything, as I mentioned earlier in the program that we did yesterday. This was never written down, and you couldn't have a list of rules like that because in the old days, because it wasn't necessary, because people worked with common sense and self-preservation. And since no guaranteed money, their careers came first. And you didn't have to tell people not to do stupid shit. And there were always people that could do shit that was incredibly safe that other people had no business even trying. I don't want the guy at River City Flooring doing open heart surgery on me, right? So that's, and the guys knew who to let do something to them and who not most of the time. So anyway, this, again, a professional match. Everything's got a risk, but these guys knew what the fuck they were doing. The one thing I didn't like, when they do the deal where Dax and Jay fall over the railing, powerbomb over the railing onto the arena floor, and the referee stops it and calls for the doctor, the people had been ballistic at that point. And suddenly teasing the doctor thing, not only stopped the momentum, but I'm afraid took the people momentarily out of things because they thought somebody was really hurt and now they're worried. But then when they started fighting back on the floor, they got them back into it, but it was a slowdown that may have been the wrong kind of slowdown there. I don't know. Am I being too critical?
No, I don't think you're being too critical. I think you're the one person allowed to be critical about tag team matches. Last time was critical of that one spot at the end of the match last week where they slowed it down and did the yay boo in the middle of the match. Again, a different kind of thing here, but the idea that you can't do anything injury related because you actually are going to cause the fans now, these kind of fans, to be legitimately concerned to take them out of the match. That's an interesting thing. I mean, these guys probably didn't plan on that when they were thinking it out.
Yeah, because you can tease injuries, but when something is that hot, is moving that quickly and going that well, and then everybody has to stop, and then they kind of get worried. But okay, everybody's okay because they're fighting again. But, I feel like that wave could have continued without that momentarily, anyway.
If you were determined to go close to an hour, is that a healthy tool to just extend the match?
Well, no.
And not get a count out?
Here's the thing. Who's to not say that you couldn't have done the same thing with two guys that weren't legal and let them sell on the outside and let the two guys do a big thing on the inside, and all four guys are down, but a doctor's not being called, and that's when people start rumbling and start, doing the on the bleachers or FTR, or it gives them a chance to chant something, and everybody's laying there while the people are making noise. But when the doctor comes in, there's still the heel can fucking cross the guy up and you can do angles and other things. But in that moment, you don't need the doctor to step in that late in the match to just slow it down for a second. Anyway, and there was a couple of suplexes on the floor, which were firm but safely performed. And they teased a count out, and then they basically got all the way in the middle. And, each guy was holding his partner up. They were so fatigued, and they got a round of applause on the four-way face-off. And they go to the slugfest. And that was where a Cash suplexed Juice. And both of them went over the top rope perfect. And now they go to the break. And that was a 6-minute segment, but they'd been 48 minutes since the bell and 39 minutes on the air. So this is still, again, it's cooking. And then they come back for the big one. They started trading the sharpshooter because that was getting over in Calgary. And at one point, Dax hit a belly to back on Jay White off the top rope, but he couldn't make the cover. So the referee was counting on both. And then came the 5-minute call from the ring announcer on the PA. And it was clear as a bell on the broadcast too, wasn't it, Brian?
Dasha. It was very clear.
Everybody heard it. And then the announcers referred to it. And Nigel is screaming, "You've only got 5 minutes," because he's pulling for gin and juice. And that's exactly what we had talked about a few weeks ago on the program, the draw between MJF and Adam Cole. If that had, that came out of nowhere and people were, But if it had been announced, it would have added drama to the last few minutes of the match, which I think you can agree it did here. People started an extra little squirming and squealing because they knew that the clock was ticking. And the guys have an excuse to get a little bit more frantic in their efforts, right, in the closing moments of this thing. But without trying to spoiler alert, blow the finish here, now, in the future, as long as they always do at least the 5-minute call, I think you ought to call every 5 minutes, but what the fuck, I'm old-fashioned. As long as they do the 5-minute call in the future, now people aren't going to know. Because the next time they call 5 minutes, whether it's 30 minutes or it's an hour, somebody's go, they're going to go to a draw. They just called 5 minutes. Well, they didn't last time. Well, that's why they will this time. Well, maybe that's what they want us to think. Wait a minute. So if they did it last time, would they do it twice in a row just to cross us up? They won't fucking know. And In 4 months, if you do another almost time limit draw and it's won in the last minute or two, but then do another time limit draw a couple months later or whatever. Then they'll never know whether you're going to go to a draw, and you can make that call and it increases the drama at the end, and they can't know for sure in their own mind, and a little doubt makes them react to whatever that you do next a little more strongly. Does that make sense?
I think it makes perfect sense.
So anyway.
And I also think when we talk about these matches specifically, this is match 2. Match 1 went 30 minutes. Match 2 went an hour. There's still a third match. So now you have this rule for the announcing the time going into that.
Well, and also just before we go to the last couple minutes of this match, that's what the Anderson brothers used to do when they had a babyface team that could do it. Or that's the same principle as Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. for the title. And there's been other instances when you had really talented workers, they would go an hour Broadway, they'd come back with a 90-minute time limit. And people think, well, there's no fucking way, right? But they would still put in 75 minutes and then do a finish or whatever. So is that next? Is it 2 out of 3 90? Who knows?
Standby matches.
Standby matches in case it ends early. Anyway, nevertheless, so they've called the 5 minutes. Dax dived for the tag, but Juice jerked Cash off the apron and ran him into the stairs, violating another rule, but again, safely. He didn't fucking throw the stairs on top of him with the sharp corner in his spleen and then double stomp him off the top rope.
Also, this is it. The tag titles are on the line. This is the chance. They have to make it happen here.
Yes.
They won the Eliminator match for this.
And then suddenly FTR turned it around and Dax got the sharpshooter on Jay White and Cash got it on Juice Robinson. And that was a huge pop from the people. But they held it for a while, but then they all collapsed exhausted. And they couldn't keep the sharpshooters. And then Dax pulls and this was a nice little touch and point. Dax pulled his knee pad down, which the announcers mentioned, so he could get further range in the bend of his knee, and got the sharpshooter back on Juice and really sat back on it, and Juice tapped out at the 58-minute mark. And they had shown 46 minutes of that match on the air. And that everybody was exhausted. Boom, they get their shit together, and they've gone within 2 minutes of the 1 hour time limit. And I would guess that has to be the longest AEW match past the Iron Man match or the marathon or whatever the fuck they called it earlier this year, the 60-minute. And then as people are clapping and applauding and they're doing the replays and all that, FTR offer the hands. They offer the handshakes. And old Jen and Juice get back up and they hesitate and they get the chant, shake their hands, shake their hands. And fucking Jay looks at Dax and spits at his feet and walks off. That was fucking great. You prickish heels. But what a fucking match. I mean, it was incredible. And the fact, again, that they could do that with limited experience with these opponents and put that much time in and keep it fresh and keep it moving was just brilliant. That could have worked on Crockett TV, Mid-South TV, Florida television, Georgia Championship Wrestling, any place at any time period. People would have gone crazy over that match.
I think, and this may not be a popular opinion, I really don't know, that may be the best FTR match I've ever seen. And we've seen a lot of good ones. We've seen 2 out of 3 fall ones. And this one, to me, between the crowd, between the actual guys in there, Jay White and Juice Robinson are really, really good. And they were and are the perfect opponents right now in here for FTR. The match was great. This is the best example of sports-based wrestling. When people say, what do you want from AEW? Why do you hate it? We were promised this. This was the kind of alternative we wanted from WWE. was this. WWE's going the route of drama and lake drownings and all sorts of stuff. We just want it's serious athletes having ass-kicking matches and nothing stupid. And this may be the best example of it. This episode of Collision, this match specifically, like I said, maybe the best FTR match. They seem extra motivated, which is a good thing. I mean, they just came out of that Jeff Jarrett program, which left everyone really disappointed. And they seem on top of their game right now, and they've got the right opponents. I will say there's an aggression and not a comfort, but there's something we're seeing from FTR right now. Maybe it's not the time right away, but an FTR heel turn, specifically an FTR heel turn on Punk or something, could be a big deal on this show.
And here's the thing when you say it may be the best FTR match.
I think so. I think so.
Well, but here's the good part about it. It's not like we're comparing this match to football field fuckery or, one of the ridiculous gimmick matches that Tony comes up with the, Buckaroos and the Cucamonga Kids and blah, blah, blah. The Briscoes and FTR matches were the grudge matches, the blood feud, the violence, right? That side of wrestling. If you like that style better done well, I'm not talking about garbage wrestling, but I'm talking about a fight, a no DQ, we're going to fucking fight type of thing, then yeah, Briscoes and FTR was great. If you like the wrestling side, then yes, Briscoes and Jay and Juice were excellent. There's
FTR.
What did I say?
Briscoes and Jay and Juice.
Or I'm sorry, FTR and yes. There's different styles of wrestling, as we've always been talking about, but not what the Cucamonga Kids would have you believe, where they want to have every goddamn goofy outlaw niche style and darling that makes fun of wrestling and makes it look silly and phony and stupid and childish. I'm not talking about those styles. I'm talking about there's different genres of match you can have. Anything from technical to high spot, to old-fashioned Tennessee-style brawl, to fucking a double chain match like the Briscoes and FTR. And you can like different genres within that, but nothing about those makes wrestling obviously phony, stupid, silly, childish, or fake. Or stupid.
And I'll say also, I think Ian and Nigel did a great job here. I know it wasn't Kevin Kelly, but I thought Ian did really, really good, and I thought Nigel was great with him.
And again, I'm not trying to slander Ian. I don't want Ian to get upset with me. I think by the end of the show, it wasn't even over yet. By the end of the show, he was, I just remember him and Caprice being a little more chill.
Well, the crowds were a little more chill too.
Well, that's true. Some of them were downright fucking frozen. The Owen Tournament Finals Women's Division was Ruby versus Willow Nightingale. And I wrote, I'm loving this show so much, I'm not taking any chances. Willow won. What did I miss?
I watched Willow's entrance because she has a good, fun, happy energy, and I like it. And she's from Long Island, so I got to support that. But I just been watching this whole match, and other than in between falls where I ran to the kitchen to grab something, I did not leave the office. I watched picture in picture. I watched a match. I'm sorry to say to Willow and Ruby, this was the match where I had to go outside and do other things.
All right. Well, and here's the thing, for the first time ever, because the Monroes were coming this morning, so I had to watch the show live. I waited till about 8:15 and then turned it on so I could fast forward through commercials and just keep the flow going. So this is where I got the sandwich, I think. And then this was followed by the VTR of not the VTR of last week, but a VTR from last week of QT apologizing to Hobbs. And again, QT Marshall does not work in this or whatever. It's so very, very bad, not good. And I didn't even understand the point of this. Somehow, QT says, well, what do I got to do to get you to forgive me? Go out and find the biggest, baddest son of a gun and beat him up? What the fuck does that have to do with the price of eggs in China, as Mama Cornette used to say?
It had nothing. It just came out of nowhere as an option.
It's an option. Now, see, you got a variety of options here, my boy. Now, number one, you could accept my apology. Or number two, I could go find some big badass and beat him up, and that'll prove to you that I did not mean to fuck you around. What?
Option three, get out of my locker room.
Yes. Option four, can you lose my phone number? And so then the House of Blech wrestled two skinny fat jobbers with weird hair, and I'm not going to say anything bad about it because that's what they should do. Somebody should be beating up some job guys around here every once in a while, get some wins and look impressive. But I'm not going to go into detail on it either.
I thought this was all right for what it was, and it was the House of Black without the spookiness. They could still have kind of the dramatic entrance without just the, magic aspect of it or whatever. I thought
until David Copperfield is on staff, they probably should limit that activity.
The only thing that I think is stupid is these guys both come out there with belts because they're 2/3 of the Trios Championship that we don't see defended ever, and no one really misses it. So it's just two guys coming out there with belts that aren't even on the line. That's the only thing I think is kind of the Trios is just ridiculous.
It's an old rule of thumb. If you're a champion, you have a belt, you should show it and wear it and get it over. But then it just reminds people that, and where's Buddy?
Is the AEW Trios Championship their version of the Western States Heritage Championship?
I don't think it's that prestigious.
Ooh.
Well, think about this. Barry Windham held the title, a big name, and it was defended, golly, for every night for 3 or 4 whole months. So they've had, fucking 12 six-man tag title matches since last year. And none lately. Anyway, let's go to the main event. The men's division Owen Hart final that surprised us when it came down this way. Ricky Starks and Like Mussolini in Calgary. CM Punk in Calgary Stampede territory. And boy, howdy. I said the Stampede territory was where they liked men, not as pussyish as Ontario, right? Maybe that'll be all CM Punk. But no, even there, the Buckaroos have infiltrated. So again, CM Punk was simultaneously the most over babyface and most over heel in the goddamn company. And now, as I believe we predicted, it didn't take Nostradamus to predict it, the booers are trying to drown out the cheerers, and the cheerers are trying to drown out the booers. And now it's just a goddamn duel. And Punk is sitting there clearly loving the level of both reactions and fucking milking it for all it's worth. But have you ever seen anything like this? Half the crowd would like to fucking shank him, and the other half would like to carry him out of the building on their shoulders.
I love it. I love that energy. And not that this match wasn't good, but it covers up for things in matches when the crowd is that into the personality.
Yes, when the people or person is this over, it's like cholesterol medicine. It covers up a lot of sins. You can eat more donuts. Anyway, as soon as the bell rang, they got dueling chants on arm ringers and a big chant on a headlock. And again, this is the wrestling show. And finally, they went back and forth with headlock takeovers, and then Starks scored with a shoulder tackle and got a big pop out of it. Imagine that. Nobody was stabbed in the head with a screwdriver, but the people are still enjoying it. How in the world can this happen? And then they had a break spot where Punk, they reversed hip tosses, and Punk hip tossed Starks over the top rope with the momentum and then held the ropes for him to get back in. And then when they came back from the break, Starks was in control, but he threw Punk to the floor. And Starks held the ropes for Punk, and Punk walked around to the other side. Little subtle shit, because he's enjoying. Here's the thing. If somebody didn't know what they were doing, as soon as they got a bunch of the audience booing them, they would start healing. They'd be pulling the hair and kicking in the nuts or pulling out a fucking foreign object. But that wouldn't make any sense because that's not who Punk is. So he's doing little subtle things that control whether it magnifies the cheers or the boos, but he's not doing anything out of character. He's not suddenly becoming someone he's not presented as just because one crowd is reacting in a certain way. And it's difficult to do that on the fly. And he got heat from the crowd with doing Brett moves, the fucking forearm drop off the turnbuckle and etc. This is where I wrote Ian is trying too hard. I think by the end of the show, he was just beside himself. And anyway, then they started getting some 2 counts. You know, Starks missed the elbow. Punk hit a clothesline. They did a double cross body and both went down. When they had the slugfest in the middle, Starks won the exchange. That's a little subtle thing. And then Punk hit a pile driver and got a 2 count. Wasn't that on the completely banned list?
I guess someone approved a lot of things this week.
I'm just thinking maybe he said, hey, nobody tells Phil Brooks how to fucking wrestle.
Maybe.
We
will find out.
Anyway, so Punk calls for the go to sleep, but Ricky Starks hits the spear and Punk goes to the floor and Starks goes out and has to roll him in. And he goes for another spear, but Punk hooks the front face lock on him on a roll through. Starks gets the ropes. And then Punk Hurricane Ranas him off the ropes and they go back and forth with roll ups. And suddenly Starks rolls him up and reaches up and grabs the middle rope, 1, 2, 3, and beats CM Punk. And that was fucking perfect. And I know everybody's going to say, what the fuck? You had all but called for the victory party. Punk had to win this thing in a match with Starks, and I would have said that, and I did say that, because Starks is a babyface. I could not see Punk doing a job for Ricky Starks as a babyface unless, as we mentioned, Samoa Joe got involved or there was something else that happened. But Starks cheated. Just holding the rope. That's all it needed. Because at a battle of the babyfaces, the babyface that won had to cheat. And that saves Punk, but it gives Starks the biggest win he's ever had. Your thoughts?
I thought it was very interesting having Ricky Starks leave there as a heel. Because not only did he cheat, I don't know if you saw any of the, I don't know if I'm going to call it an overrun, the beginning of Battle of the Belts.
I did not. My DVR froze right at the fucking 1, 2, 3 and arm up.
They go, we're going to go to Battle of the Belts. And they do this big intro. And I'm like, oh shit, did they tape this somewhere else? And then they just go right back to Ian and Nigel sitting there. But you see Punk in the ring and Starks leaving, and he grabs the trophy from Liger, Jushin Liger. On the stage, he grabs the trophy in a very disrespectful way and just walks off, smiling. I mean, he's happy. He's not like an angry guy.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have time for Jushin Liger. He just held the ropes against CM Punk. We've been saying they got to do something with Ricky Starks because as over as he is and was, and he still is, he
never does anything.
It may be time to do something different with him. And you need guys on this roster, on this Saturday show, to do different things. And this is an interesting twist no one expected, maybe. And we'll see what happens.
So overall, we must give our applause. And certainly that's the best AEW television program they've ever produced.
Ooh, you know, it's tough. I mean, the first episode of Rampage was really good. The first episode of, well, not the first episode of Rampage.
I mean up and down. I'm not talking about the greatest segment, greatest moment, greatest match. I'm just talking about top to bottom. Even the girls' match, nobody got their face bashed in.
In terms of sports-based wrestling, with the exception of the QT segment and possibly the theatrics of House of Black, but I'm okay with it because it was just a tag match. This was the best sports-based wrestling episode of AEW they've ever produced.
And again, you know, At least we have to thank them for separating the problem children. It's just that they weren't correct in assuming which side the problem was on. But now that we don't have to look at any of the foolishness and we get the talented guys on a show, I'm going to start watching this live every week when it happens. I'll wait 15 minutes before I start so I can still zip through commercials. But what the fuck?
That's the way people treat real sports. That's the way you treat a sports-based product. You want to watch it live.
Well, and they haven't given me one up until now that I wanted to watch live because I knew that there were points where I'd have to either just zip through 20 minutes at a time or cut my own throat. Collision has collided. Let's see now, and I want to see what they're coming back, and I hope they don't do it. FTR and Gin and Juice a rematch quickly, because they're going to burn that out just in terms of how often can you do something like this. But I'm interested to see what the next match stipulations will be or whatever.
And I hope it's not like any stipulation outside the ring. When you say stipulation, I hope it's like a time limit stipulation, not like all of a sudden it's a bull rope match or something.
Something that is it 3 out of 5 falls with the 90-minute time limit?
Ooh.
Like they used to do in the 60s in the WWF with the 6-man tag matches.
When is the tag title eliminator tournament final? The blind tag title eliminator tournament final.
Ooh. Because that's going to complicate that. Well, no, MJF and Adam Cole should not win the tag team title, even if they're the winners of the tournament and get the shot.
I'm not saying they should, but in terms of scheduling, you said, when are they, hope they don't rush the next match. If that tournament final is this coming week, and then you're going to wait, I would think at least a week or maybe for a pay-per-view for the tag title match, that gives you some time for the third match. Because then you also have to decide who goes over.
A very good, as a matter of fact, very good point there. And I would say that I wouldn't be shocked or offended if FTR dropped the belts to these guys, with the theory that we would certainly see at least another couple of matches with them trying to win them back.
That's how good a job they did with that match. We heard from a lot of listeners that really thought Bullet Club Gold were going to win the belts. In the middle of the match, all of a sudden they started thinking it was going to happen.
Yeah. And it could have, and nobody would have been shocked or they wouldn't have looked out of place, but it's early for that yet. They're still building this thing because now that's why the Briscoes and FTR match number 2 and 3 did business far and above and beyond what those shows would have done on their own and left to their own devices, because people had heard how good the first one was. And then on the third one, they'd heard how good the first 2 were. So when they're doing stuff like this with these guys, there's no reason not to have more matches, because that will increase the likelihood people want to see them again. Anyway,